babies in incubators whose life support and incubator will have to be turned off because the Israelis have cut the power to Gaza.
Are you seriously keep on asking me about Palestinian civilians? What's wrong with you? Have you not seen what happened? We're fighting Nazis.
The Israeli military is almost certainly at this point going to start a ground invasion into the Gaza Strip. Israel has already launched multiple raids today across the Gaza Strip for what they say was an attempt to retrieve Israeli prisoners, but also almost certainly were probing operations, shaping operations, so they can understand certain weak points where they might be able to enter the Gaza Strip, what areas might be harder to enter the Gaza Strip. This is also similar to what we've covered the war in Ukraine more, maybe I could reference that. How the Ukrainian military has tried to probe different positions along the Russian line to figure out where's the weakest, where can we enter, where would be a harder fight that we could avoid if we just went around it. So we have shaping operations and attempts to rescue Israeli prisoners. But putting the shaping operations and Israel gathering more troops at the border, gathering more artillery guns at the border, and the continued bombardment that Israel's been laying down into the Gaza Strip, well exceeding the 6,000 bombs they announced a few days ago that they had dropped in the Gaza Strip. Israel has also come out with a new announcement that has really shocked the world and reportedly has also shocked the American government and came and blindsided them. Israel's military has directed the evacuation of northern Gaza, a region that is home to 1.1 million people, within 24 hours. Now, this was about 24 to about 20 hours ago. So we're zooming to the end of this evacuation period. Now, I don't know where to even start with this. I guess the first thing I should start with is showing you guys what part of Gaza we're talking about. Here's a map. So we're talking about an area that is about half the size of the Gaza Strip, holds 1.1 million people, and they have been given 24 hours to evacuate into southern Gaza. It has been made clear by both the United Nations and any NGO worth their weight, as well as medics on the ground and activists on the ground and third parties, that a 24-hour notice to evacuate civilians does not give hospitals enough time to get patients out, does not give them enough time to prepare hospital beds for when they need to be moved, does not give enough time for civilians to get out of the area. 24 hours is an inordinately small amount of time to give civilians to evacuate. And here is an example of one NGO. I could show you NGO after NGO, UN statement, Human Rights Watch, all these different groups that are talking about how 24 hours is not enough. But I think MSF International, which provides medical treatment for people in the Gaza Strip who have been injured by Israeli bombardments, they have had people killed by the Israeli bombardment. I think showing their testimony makes the most sense since they have people on the ground. Israel's 24 notice that people in northern Gaza must leave their land, homes, and hospitals is outrageous. This represents an attack on medical care and humanity. Let's play the clip.
The 24-hour notice to the people in northern Gaza to leave their land, homes, and hospitals is outrageous. This represents an attack on medical care and on humanity. We are talking about more than 1 million human beings. We have consistently seen dehumanizing language, and this violence is a manifestation of that. Unprecedented doesn't even cover the medical humanitarian impact. Gaza is being flattened. Thousands of people are dying. This must stop now. We condemn Israel's demand in the strongest possible terms.
Israel, in responding to the backlash, has largely just ignored it, not extended their timeline in any capacity, and right when the timeline has been coming to a close, this was actually sent to me as I was starting upstream, they ended up bombing some convoys that were trying to leave northern Gaza. 1 second, give me a moment. Let me just, I think I can show this on stream. There's not much I can show on stream for obvious reasons. But this is just one example of one of the convoys that were leaving northern Gaza into southern Gaza that got exploded by IDF bombing. This is not going to be the last time, and this is not the first time something like this has happened. The death toll, according to the local administrative health organizations, and when I say that, what I mean is the ruling party in the Gaza Strip. We're talking about Hamas. We're talking about the Palestinian government there. And so obviously that's a biased source, but there's not any other body to give this sort of a source. They're saying that the death toll has already passed 1,500, and that also does not include injuries. Hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of people are already displaced, and now 1.1 million people have been set to be displaced by this area being cordoned off by the Israeli military, and basically saying to the Palestinians in the Strip, make a mad dash into southern Gaza because we're going to unleash all hell. And that's what they're saying with this evacuation order, is we're giving you 24 hours. After that 24 hours, we're going to let loose, we're going to bomb, and we're not going to hold anything back. That is the signal that Benjamin Netanyahu's been sending. That's the signal Benny Gantz has been sending, the leader of the Blue and White Party that has made this unity government with Netanyahu for the duration of the Israel-Hamas war. He even said, well, on TV, and I know somebody was linking this earlier, and we've played it on the show before, when asked about whether Israel is going to, consider the civilian casualties and what about the civilian death toll of an operation like this, he got offended. He got angry. And he didn't only get a little angry, he got very, very, very angry. Can we actually pull it up? Do we have the interview? Can somebody link it quick? Nope, nobody has it? Okay, then we're not watching it. Never mind. Anyway, moving on. This has produced a quite muted response from the United States Congress, the United States Senate, and the United States presidency. And in a press briefing on Wednesday, when the White House press secretary, Jean-Pierre, was being asked questions about, hey, there's certain progressive lawmakers that are calling for a ceasefire and a de-escalation of violence because they're seeing the death toll rising. They're seeing Israel quite blatantly saying they're not going to care about civilian casualties, or when they're asked about civilian casualties, they react angrily. They have unleashed thousands upon thousands of bombs in a very haphazard manner that has leveled apartment house after apartment house, and they're quite proud of it. Here's an example of the Israeli Air Force posting pictures of destroyed homes. I mean, complete blocks that have been leveled to the ground, people's homes, people's shops, people's livelihoods. And this is what they had to say about it. Dozens of fighter jets and helicopters attacked a series of terrorist targets of Hamas, the terrorist organization, throughout the Gaza Strip. So far, the IAF, that's the Israeli Air Force, has dropped about 6,000 bombs against Hamas targets, and they post all this picture of destruction. They don't post pictures of the Israeli planes. They don't post pictures of Israeli Air Force pilots getting ready to go off. They don't even post pictures of them actually engaging in the bombing. What they post pictures of is the destruction of the Gaza Strip. I keep hearing this line from different commentators that revenge is not a strategy, that if Israel just goes in there, kills everything, bombs everyone, and then doesn't have an occupation plan, does not have a rebuilding plan, does not have a plan to give Palestinians a fair shake, which this government does not have a plan to give Palestinians a fair shake or their own or self-rule, then what's going to happen is they're going to fight a war. It's going to be very bloody. And then in 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to be right back where we started. And maybe instead of Hamas, that assumes that Hamas doesn't go into exile, come back, and reform its control, it'll just be an organization like Palestinian Islamic Jihad or some new organization we never heard before. Who knows? But this seems, when you're posting these pictures, it seems like a revenge policy. It seems like it's a policy of revenge. Anyway, when asked about this, the White House press secretary responded, maybe ceasefire, de-escalation. I've seen some of these statements this weekend. We're going to be very clear. We believe they're wrong. We believe they're repugnant, and we believe they're disgraceful. That's a little much, isn't it? We never got a reaction like this for people calling for a ceasefire in Ukraine. This angry, this like, oh, they're repugnant for asking for a ceasefire. And that's a situation where Ukrainians are liberating their occupied territory. In this situation, it is the Palestinians who have their territory occupied. And this war between Israel and Hamas was caused by a massive terror attack. But the complications of the geopolitics behind what caused the pressure cooker that led to Hamas are a lot more complicated than what I think is a lot more clear black and white moral picture from the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and we never saw any talk like this. What is preempting such a, how dare you call for de-escalation? How dare you call for ceasefire? How dare you? How dare you? What caused it? Well, the Huffington Post has produced a report saying that there is an internal memo within the White House telling diplomats no quote-unquote de-escalation talks. Let's read this article. As Israel escalates its attacks on Gaza, the State Department is discouraging diplomats working on Middle East issues from making public statements that the U.S. wants to see less violence, according to internal emails viewed by the Huffington Post. In messages circulated on Friday, State Department staff wrote that high-level officials do not want press materials to include three specific phrases: de-escalation, ceasefire, end the violence/bloodshed, and restoring calm. Let me say those again. De-escalation/ceasefire, end to violence/bloodshed, and restoring calm. So it's from this memo, it seems that the official American position is just full-throated. We're behind Israel. Everything they do, we're giving a big old thumbs up to. We're going to give them shells. We're going to give them air defense. We're going to put 2 carrier strike groups in the ocean next to Israel to dissuade anybody else from intervening, like Iran, for example. And we're going to say, attaboy, we're with you. And not only are we going to say, attaboy, we're with you, but anybody who's talking about the horrors of the violence and the bloodshed that the unrelenting Israeli bombing campaign is causing, we're going to say that's repugnant, disgraceful, and we're going to tell our diplomats they can't say things like restoring calm. Let me remind you guys that at this point, like, we all acknowledge that the terror attack in southern Israel was horrific. But if you believe the Ministry of Health of Gaza, and I understand that it comes from a biased source, the amount of civilian dead has already surpassed the amount of civilian dead in southern Israel. And this isn't a contest of like, I have more dead civilians, therefore I'm right. That's not how this works. But if we acknowledge the horror of the terror attack, if we acknowledge the horror of that bloodshed, why can't we also acknowledge the horror of a relentless bombing campaign that bombs humanitarian convoys, kills UN workers, kills journalists, kills Palestinian civilians, kills Palestinian children, and has shown zero even intent to display a level of restraint, where the images they're posing are of burnt out husks of former homes, and the burnt out husks of these homes are the achievement in and of itself to the Israeli Air Force. This is horrific. This is bizarrely horrific. Now, after the 24-hour, actually, let me see if I got that report here. Where do we got that report? Here it is. After the 24-hour evacuation notice was given, we got this report from a journalist from The Guardian. He's the diplomatic editor, Patrick Wintour, who tweeted out this. Seems extraordinary that U.S. officials now confirming Israel did not inform Blinken, that's Anthony Blinken, that it was set to warn people in Gaza. They had 24 hours to move south. Feels as if Blinken is slowly trying to unravel this with his alternative safe zone plan that may take days to prepare. Might explain Schaap's self-evident discomfort this morning when asked by Mashul Hassan if the UK supported the plan. He had no line to take and consequent decision to lash out at the BBC coverage before accusing her of taking interview down a rabbit hole he himself introduced. That means that Israel announced this 24-hour evacuation period. Oh boy, look at that. Look at that. Sepson, this is a failure of mod. This is a failure of moderation. Yeah, I gotta say, the anti-Arab racism has gotten out of control. Like, really out of control online, man. From, like, the horrific videos we're seeing from Israeli settlers, like mocking them with TikTok videos of, like, haha, I got water, I got electricity. Like all of the like calls for violence. It is really bad, man. It is really bad. All of the worst degenerates have gathered out of the woodwork to say things online they could never and would never say in person. Ever, 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 ever in a million years. Because every single one of them would get their, number one, they would get their ass beat. And number two, they're probably so socially anxious that they're unwilling to answer the DoorDash caller when they call them. They don't like having social interactions. They don't like interacting with real people. So they lash out their racism mostly online to make up for the fact that, you know, nobody wants to talk to them in real life. Anyway, where were we going? What were we saying? Anyway, it seems like the Israeli government gave zero warning whatsoever to any humanitarian organization, whether it be the UN, whether it be the United States, whether it be the Egyptian government, who could, if they wanted to, open the border with Palestinians. They've said that they shouldn't. They said that Palestinians should stay in their homes because the Israelis are going to take their homes if they leave. I don't really think that's the Egyptian government's place to make such a decision. I don't know if we should be saying to 48% of the Gaza Strip's population, which are children, that those kids need to stay in their home, which is almost certainly going to be flattened, to make a statement against Israeli colonization. And Egypt is going to help them by keeping them in this barrel, which the Israelis can shoot the fish in. I think it's not really a humanitarian, we stand with the Palestinians angle. I think that they're terrified of Hamas infiltration. I think that's what they're terrified of, and they're trying to find some other excuse outside of that. Anyway, the fact that not only did they only give them 24 hours to evacuate, which is not enough time, all the NGOs on the ground acknowledge that, all of the medical groups on the ground that are trying to save lives acknowledge that, the UN acknowledges that, Human Rights Watch acknowledges that, and it seems like even Israel's allies were not given any warning that they were only going to have this much time to evacuate civilians. There seems to be zero attempt by the Israeli government to try to limit civilian casualties. And it feels like to me that the 24-hour notification is almost like a, look, we gave them 24 hours, now we can do whatever we want. Full throttled, we're going in, we're killing everything. That's what it looks like to me. I think that this announcement of only a 24-hour evacuation period even kind of startled the American administration somewhat. You could see Joe Biden, even though he gave that very pro-Israel speech earlier on that many Israelis took with very kind ears, he released a different statement today that seemed to be, more like, hey, wait a second, just remember that the majority of Palestinians aren't Hamas, and it seemed to be a shift in tone after this 24-hour time period was announced. A little too late for that shift in tone. Maybe if he had this tone earlier on, the Israelis would be limiting their actions slightly more. I don't know if they would have or would not. It's all speculation at this point. But listen what he had to say.
The humanitarian crisis in Gaza. At my direction, our teams are working in the region, including communicating directly with the governments of Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and other Arab nations, and the United Nations to surge support and humanitarian consequences for Hamas attack to help Israel. We can't lose sight of the fact that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians had nothing to do with Hamas and Hamas's appalling attacks, and they're suffering as a result as well. This morning, I spoke.
It's a good time to remind people that the majority of Palestinians didn't vote for Hamas, and that the majority of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, 65%, that they wanted to keep the ceasefire with the Israeli government. Just a good time to notice that and to mention that. But I want to compare it, and this guy has been posting some old clips from Biden. I wanted to compare this tone from Joe Biden, this slight shift of tone to acknowledge, the importance of preserving civilian lives in the Gaza Strip, to what Joe Biden sounded like when he was talking about South Africa and the apartheid regime and the brutality of the apartheid regime and the denial of democracy and civil rights for Black people in the country. And just see the difference in tone in comparing these two issues. When Joe Biden knows that he's giving artillery shells to a government that at the moment has basically zero concern for civilians in the Gaza Strip, and that's the type of tone he's taking, versus this.
that you adhere to. And then and I will go over them in a moment. Then you say on page 14, we must not become part of South Africa's problem. We must remain part of their solution. We must not aim to impose ourselves, our solutions, our favorites in South Africa. Damn it, we have favorites in South Africa. The favorites in South Africa are the people who are being repressed by that ugly white regime. We have favorites. Our loyalty is not to South Africa, it's to South Africans. And the South Africans are majority black, and they are being excoriated. It is not to some stupid puppet government over there. It is not to the Afrikaner regime. We have no loyalty to them. We have no loyalty to South Africa, to South Africans. And the fact of the matter is I listen to this rationale, first of all. It is the leaders of South Africa and their people, black and white, who have the majority responsibility. They must rise to it. Well, they are rising to it. They're rising to it. The only thing left available to them with that repulsive, repugnant regime of Afrikaners there. And it's the only way they have. They've tried everything for the last 20 years. They begged, they borrowed, they crawled, and now they're taking up arms. The second thing, progress toward peace requires a timetable. Timetable, elimination of apartheid. What's our timetable? What are we saying to that repugnant regime? Are we saying you've got 20 days, 20 months?
I just wanted to mention quickly before we finish this, because this clip is great, and this is a fantastic Joe Biden moment. And he was really good on the issue of South Africa. I mean, relative to politicians, but he was relatively good on South Africa. Is that he can acknowledge that when you take all options from a group of people and deny them self-rule and entrap them in an open-air prison, or he can acknowledge that when you treat them as lesser than and keep them in a state of destitution, and Netanyahu's government policy was to perpetuate this conflict in perpetuity, never giving them self-rule, whether it be in Jerusalem, whether it be in the Gaza Strip and allowing them to move freely out of the Gaza Strip, or whether it be in the occupation zones, in the West Bank, in the illegal Israeli expansion, the illegal Israeli settlements. He acknowledges this when it comes to South Africa, that when you take all the other means away from their disposal, you're going to create a tight, what's the word? I keep calling it, not a cooking pot. Sorry, I'm very sick. Not a cooking pot, but a hot pot, a clusterfuck of anger and poverty and desperation that is going to push people into the arms of groups like Hamas, of the groups like Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So Joe Biden understands this concept. This isn't like a boiling pot, thank you. This isn't like a pressure cooker. This isn't like an ideological problem for Joe Biden where he can't figure out what happens when you put people under these material conditions. He understands that. He understands that 100%. Got an air fryer. He understands that 100%. It's just that there's a double standard in American politics when it comes to Palestine and Israel.
What are we saying to that repugnant regime? Are we saying you've got 20 days, 20 months, 20 years? We asked them to put up a timetable. What's our timetable? These people are being crushed. And we're sitting here with the same kind of rhetoric. The same thing we heard. We heard go slow. We heard we have to take care of the problem afterwards. We heard we can't impose.
You are totally misconstruing the testimony that I gave.
Read first.
Furthermore, Senator, let me say that I hate to hear a senator of the United States calling for violence.
I'm not calling for violence.
That's what you're doing.
I hate to hear
exactly what you're doing.
I hate to hear an administration and a Secretary of State refusing to act on a morally abhorrent point. I hate to hear this country. I'm ashamed that this country puts out a policy like this that says nothing.
He's going to says nothing of the horrible treatment. The clip goes on and on to say, of the horrible treatment of the black population, et cetera, et cetera. Now, compare that to the statement that was put out in the United States by McCall and Meeks and signed by basically every single legislator in the House except for 13 members of Congress. And those 13 members of Congress was Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, Andre Carson, Al Green, Summer Lee, Gwen Moore, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Delina Ramirez, Melina Stansbury, Benny Thompson, and Rashida Tlaib. And let's see if we can find the acknowledgement of the brutal bombing campaign when this resolution talks about standing with Israel, because that's what the resolution is. It's standing with Israel. Standing with Israel as it defends itself against the barbaric war launched by Hamas and other terrorists. Whereas on October 7, 2023, Hamas terrorists launched a massive unprovoked war on Israel by air, land, and sea, including firing thousands of rockets, whereas this heinous assault took place just after the 50th anniversary of the start of the multi-front 1973 Yom Kippur war against Israel, whereas Hamas terrorists crossed the border. And this goes on to talk about, the terror attack in southern Israel, which was the deadliest days for Jews since the Holocaust, over 1,200, numbers probably still rising to some extent as they find some body and burnt out kibbutzes. But over 1,200 dead Jews, horrific attack, but there's no acknowledgement of the brutalization of the Palestinian population. There's no acknowledgement about the brutalization of just the, not only of the occupation, but of settler expansion and settler provocateurs, far-right provocateurs in the Israeli settler community, who are purposely trying to continue creeping forward and forward and forward, taking more Palestinian homes, more Palestinian land that under international law is not theirs. The same international law that the United States uses and cites to protect Ukraine's borders, and to say that Russia does not have a right to Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson, which it doesn't. But Israel also does not have a right to the West Bank either, or to the Gaza Strip. And not only is there no acknowledgement in this, I could maybe be like, look, we're going to have one resolution that stands with Israel against this terror attack. What about another resolution that, calls for a humanitarian convoy and tries to save as many Palestinian lives as possible and calls for an end to the occupation? Well, no, they won't even saying a bill put forward that calls for the end of the occupation. That's too radical. That's not even being included. That's not even a question. I wonder if I know I had it here somewhere. I hope I didn't close it off. But there was legislation. Here it is, right here. Progressive lawmakers write Biden to express deep concern over Israel's coming Gaza campaign. Representative Mark Pocan. As Israel's fight against Hamas continues, I helped lead 55 members of Congress in urging the U.S. to ensure that innocent civilians in Gaza are protected. That includes following international law, delivering food and water to Gaza, providing safe and passage and humanitarian assistance. 55. That's 25% of House Democrats. 1/4 of House Democrats, no Republicans. Not a single Republican, but 55 House Democrats. What was so radical about this that the other resolution, everybody but 13 legislators signs on to it. This resolution, only 55. Let's read what was in this resolution. The lawmaker said that Biden should help reestablish the delivery of food, water, and electricity to Gaza, discourage hate crimes against both Jews and Muslims in the United States, and guarantee any supplemental funding requests made of Congress include humanitarian aid for Palestinians and Israelis. In addition, they asked Biden to make the case that Israel follows international law and instruct the U.S. to work with partners in the region to set up a humanitarian corridor allowing Palestinian civilians to leave Gaza. This wasn't a resolution saying, end the occupation, free Palestine. This wasn't a resolution saying we need to end shipping of shells to Israel that could be used to bomb the Gaza Strip. And the bombing campaign has been particularly brutal. This was just a resolution that said, hey, let's take some steps to preserve as much life as possible as Israel moves into the Gaza Strip. The operation is inevitable. Everybody but 13 legislators stands with Israel in this operation. The operation's happening, so how about we release a resolution that protects the people in the Gaza Strip from the most brutal of brutalization and allow them some avenues of escape, some avenues to food, water, and electricity. 55. 25% of the Democrats, not a single Republican, not a rat's chance in hell of it ever passing. This is what Congressman Greg Caesar said. He was one of the few people who voted against the Stand with Israel legislation. He also voted on the other legislation as well, the one that only had 55. The Palestinian people are not Hamas. The response to Hamas's horrific terrorism cannot be mass death of innocent Palestinians. Israel, just like the United States, must follow international law, even when Hamas does not. Our humanity is at stake. I've seen a few calls from Israeli media to maintain, you know, humanity and dignity when engaging in such sort of operation. Here's an example of that. I want to give credit to the Israelis that are calling for some level of restraint, but the calls for restraint are like, listen to the title of this one. Israelis must maintain their humanity even when there's blood boils, even when their blood boils. Basically saying, and the article argues that, hey, we're angry, we want revenge, we understand, but we shouldn't go in there and just slaughter everyone. But when Benny Gantz is put forward that question, the head of the Blue and White Party is like, hey, do you think we should preserve the lives of these Palestinians? You know, worry about civilian casualties? Gets fucking mad. He gets really mad. You know what? Nobody linked it earlier. I'll get it myself. Benny Gantz interview. Is this it? Oh, here it is.
We can speak to the former
Somebody finally finding it.
Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, who's joining us now.
Oh, I kept saying Benny Gantz. Sorry, this is Naftali Bennett.
Now live at Naftali Bennett, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us today. What are the next steps for the Israeli military in terms of dealing with Hamas?
We set a goal of eradicating Hamas. The first step until now was to fend off and fight all the terrorists that are still in Israel and kill them. Kill as many Hamas terrorists as possible and protect our people. As we speak right now, there are a lot of forces, special forces, fighting those Hamas Nazis in southern towns, but it seems that we're on top of things right now. The next step is to go on the offensive and to eradicate this Nazi-type Hamas. In my life, I've never used the term Nazi for anything but the original Nazis. This is the first time I'm using it because it's the exact same ideology of annihilating Jews just because they're Jews. We are talking about monsters who rape, sever parts of bodies, abduct 85-year-old women and 2-month-old babies. This is not an enemy. This is a monster, and we're going to treat it as such.
And we've just heard from a woman whose entire family have been taken. While pursuing Hamas, how is the IDF going to make sure that civilians, ordinary Palestinians, are not caught up in the violence?
The responsibility for all the Israelis in captivity lies with Hamas. I can tell you right now that Hamas, Nazi Hamas, is soon to feel the full wrath of the Israeli people, because we're a nation of lions. Yes, we took a huge hit. I want to show you the Kedem family, this family, the father Jonathan, the mother Tamar, the girls Shachar, Arbel, and the little baby Omer. This is just one family that was totally wiped out, murdered from point blank among dozens and dozens of families that are wiped off of earth by these monsters.
He isn't very eager to answer that question about preserving civilian casualties, does he? I mean, not preserving civilian casualties, as many civilians dead as possible. No, stopping civilian casualties.
But at the same time, I want to tell you that Israel and the Jewish people, we're a nation of lions. We're up, and I can tell you that in all military units, reservists, I fought for many years.
Can I just say, and I don't know if this is a stupid comment or not. I'm in Ukraine, and in Lviv, the lions are everywhere. Their units have lions on their a lot of their symbolism. They have like actual statues of lions everywhere. The lion has been part of Lviv since like the 14th century. It's like a city symbol. Israelis talking about being lions. What is it with nations that don't have lions constantly like citing lions? I understand it's like a courageous symbol, but when you're talking about like Lviv, they're like what, thousands upon thousands of miles away from where the lions actually live. Why the lion? Why the lion? Why not like a local animal? Why not like a boar? Boars are cool. Boars are fierce. Boars can get shot multiple times and keep running.
In the commando units of IDF, I was defense minister, prime minister. I can tell you we're at 150% enlistment rate. Every Israeli wants to go fight and hit and kill those terrorists. We're going to hit back like you've never seen before.
And what
He didn't answer the question about civilians at all. He just avoided it completely.
Mr. Bennett, what responsibility do you think that the Israeli army now have on making sure that other families aren't torn apart by this, other innocents aren't lost in this? And I'm speaking specifically about the Palestinians in Gaza.
Well, the Palestinian IDF does not target civilians ever. We're not.
That has happened. I mean, I saw like Alan Dershowitz say something similar on Fox News today when he was talking to Cornel West. We're gonna watch that later. But Gaza protest sniper, just one of the most famous recent incidents of this. 42 knees in one day. Israeli snipers open up about shooting Gazan protesters. Over 200 Palestinians were killed and nearly 8,000 were injured during the almost 2 years of weekly protests at the Israel-Gaza border. Israeli army snipers tell their stories. There was one instance, and they would like deliberately do this, like 42 knees in one day. You can go look this up if you want to and find out all the different stories. I think the 2018 protests were particularly bad. And they would like describe the shootings as, I mean, they were recording the shootings like on their cell phone cameras as they did it. And the only reason why we ever found out is because a member of that sniper team ended up leaking it because he was disgusted by the behavior of the other snipers that were just basically sniping these kids for fun. And so the idea that the IDF has never deliberately targeted civilians is nonsense. I mean, it's just not true. I mean, the current administration in government, under their administration, the IDF has deliberately targeted civilians.
Like our Nazi enemy. We will never target civilians deliberately. What we do is when there's a building or any Hamas related infrastructure, we tell the people, get out of there and we're going to destroy it. We hunt down the Hamas. If Hamas decides to murder its own people by using them as human shields, then Hamas will be responsible for murdering those Palestinians.
And what about those Palestinians in hospital who are on life support, and babies and incubators whose life support and incubator will have to be turned off because the Israelis have cut the power to Gaza?
Are you seriously keep on asking me about Palestinian civilians? What's wrong with you? Have you not seen what happened? We're fighting Nazis. We don't target them. Now, the world can come and bring them anything they want. If you want to bring them electricity, I'm not going to feed electricity or water to my enemies. If anyone else wants, that's fine. We're not responsible for them.
This is the point.
But you
this
keep
is the
on.
point.
I want to tell you. No. Listen. You listen to me right now. I've heard you enough.
No, I understand.
What do you mean heard you enough? He asked you've talked to the majority of the interview. This is how interviews work. They ask questions and you answer questions. If you want to like cry about the fact that a journalist like, hey, can we just make sure we don't kill a ton of children, please? And that offends you, then maybe you shouldn't be in government. And maybe you shouldn't certainly be involved in military operations. And if the statement is just, they're Nazis, so how dare you ask about civilian casualties? Then is the official stance of the Israeli government that when we're fighting a government that we deem to be, and Hamas is pretty abhorrent, that we deem to be abhorrent, anybody that was in their zone of control, free reign. You know, we're not going to deliberately target them. At least publicly, they're not going to say that. I don't think it's Israeli government policy to literally just bomb the civilians, like left, right, and center, and only target. So I don't think that we have any evidence of that. But we've seen no real effort by the Israeli government to try to reasonably preserve life and reduce casualties of civilians, reduce the quote-unquote collateral damage. And that is the responsibility of the Israeli government. It is the responsibility, if they are going to engage in a military operation, to limit to the best of their ability collateral damage. That is their responsibility. And a journalist holding them to that responsibility isn't an offensive question. Did you know that, we had civilians shot in southern Israel? And because our civilians were shot in southern Israel, now we can bomb their civilians. How dare you? How many dead Palestinians do we need to hit before it's like, okay, we've gotten our revenge? At what's like that's what this feels like. If it's we don't care about Palestinian casualties, we don't care about civilian casualties, and that seems to be the vibe I'm getting from Naftali Bennett, Netanyahu, and the entire Israeli administration. That's why they only gave them 24 hours to evacuate. That's why the idea of giving the Palestinians water and food access and electricity is so offensive to them. It's because this is a revenge campaign. This is a revenge campaign, and revenge is not a strategy. It is not a strategy to long-term security or peace in the region. It's revenge. That's it. Violence begets violence, etc., etc. And by the way, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, cutting off the water to the Gaza Strip, cutting off the food to the Gaza Strip, and cutting out electricity to the Gaza Strip, who does that hurt? Who is it going to hurt first? It's going to hurt Palestinian civilians first. Hamas, in the tunnels that they've dug up for over 15 years, they filled it with water bottles, they filled it with fuel, they filled it with generators, they filled it with food. They're going to be fine. The first people to hurt are going to be civilian, working class Palestinians. That's going to be the first people to feel the pain. On every level, from the small amount of time they've given to engage in evacuation, from the scale of the bombardment that they've engaged in, and just how they've demolished house after house after house, entire blocks, from the cutting off of essential services, the bombing of medical staff, the bombing of UN staff, bombing of journalists. I have been given no impression that the Israeli government is giving any care into the protection of Palestinian civilians and limiting collateral damage in a military operation. I haven't been given that indication. And if they are engaging in an operation that gives any concern to the civilian casualties, what assumption am I supposed to make about what's going to be the state of affairs in the occupation period? What's going to be the state of affairs when they try to set up some type of body to govern the Gaza Strip?
Conversation here. Listen, this is my program. This is my show, and I am asking the questions. You're raising your voice, and I've asked you, and we've already stopped, please, and let me finish. We've already distinguished between Hamas.
I want to tell you,
you're trying to speak over me.
We are not. Shame on you.
It's nothing about shame.
You can't. You're just supposed to care about the Israelis. I was told it.
Trying to have a conversation about a very serious.
Shame on you. Why do you care about their children too? My children matter. Their children are stupid and all Nazis. They're Nazi children. My children's not Nazi. Ah! What is he doing? What is this? This isn't politics. This is like, okay, I got so much shit for hosting Hippy Dippy. Oh, you're making politics wrestling. What is this? What is this?
Situation here, and you are refusing to address it.
Jump over immediately, and again, you
absolutely not. You are incorrect.
They are responsible. Because,
by the way, someone just said this in chat. Kudos to the host for not like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'll carry the bombs for you. I'm happy. He said, no, their children. We want to hear if you're going to protect their children. If you're going to try to limit civilian casualties. You have a responsibility to it. You've dodged the question twice. We want an answer. Because he did dodge the question twice. He chose not to answer it and then got surprised that when a political leader, the ex-prime minister of the country, was unwilling to answer a question about preserving civilian casualties as they're engaging in a campaign of destruction in the Gaza Strip. He's surprised that when he dodged the question that a decent journalist didn't just double down and lick his shoes and instead followed up on the question.
Because I can tell you that when the UK, when Great Britain was fighting the Nazis during World War II, no one asked what's going on in Dresden. It was the Nazis targeting London.
Wait, is this like a deliberate? Is this like a deliberate? We are going to bomb civilians. Why does anyone care? Think about all the other time everyone else killed civilians. Why do you care about when we do it? But is that the argument?
And you targeted Dresden. So
listen,
shame on you if you go on with that false narrative.
We're not talking about that, and in hindsight, many people have listened. And in hindsight, many people have readdressed that kind of carpet bombing.
Babies Oh, I see. Now you're Mr. Clean. Shame on you.
Absolutely.
What is this? It's quite literally. Oh, so you're angry that we're gonna kill some civilians. Oh, boo-hoo. You guys killed civilians before. Remember when you guys were the most brutal empire, one of the most brutal, expansive empires in history? Yeah, remember that? That's what we're doing. What? What is this argument? What is this argument? It quite literally is, oh, so now all of a sudden everyone cares about civilian casualties. It's this open argument. Oh, I can't believe, wow. So what, we got our hands a little dirty with dead Palestinian children. So what of it? Didn't you guys kill German children during World War II?
Not, and I'm not, listen, Mr. Bennett, I am not in the military. I am a journalist asking you questions. Are you going to let me ask you a question, or you continue shouting at me? We've already distinguished between Hamas and the Palestinians. I'm asking you very directly,
what do you want to ask?
Is going to be done to make sure that those innocent people don't get killed, as innocent Jewish people were killed on Saturday?
Well, we're going to target Hamas, and we're telling Hamas that if you use anyone as your human shield...
Dude, there's no, like, just talk about, like, rules of engagement. Why doesn't he just be like, well, this is the process that we go through to, you know, protect... He could just go through the old, like, well, we dropped the fake bomb, and then we dropped the real bomb. We dropped the warning. He could just say that, which has been the standard Israeli line for forever. But he doesn't even want to say that. The public stance of Israeli politicians as part of Netanyahu's coalition, and those... many of those even outside of his coalition, seem to just be, we'll do whatever the fuck we want. We'll deal with this however we want to. And the rest of the world is just gonna have to look on and deal with it.
And you're gonna shoot at us using human shields? That it's their responsibility. Listen, mister, if someone is shooting at your...
Mister, I like the finger pointing, by the way. I should interview people on stream like this. This is how I should interview stream. Okay, this is how I should do it. Loner box, how can you smarmy cuck bastard, tell anybody about the Palestine-Israel war when you live in the United Kingdom, a white supremacist, homophobic, transphobic, misogynistic, Islamophobic, Hindu-phobic, Sinophobic, Irish-phobic, fat-phobic country. You rat, I can't believe it. What's with the finger? What's with the finger? Is he trying to not be annoying or be the most annoying person in the world?
Children and hiding behind a human shield, will you shoot back or not? I'm asking you a question. Someone's shooting at your children, but hiding behind civilians. What's the answer? What would you do?
Mr. Bennett, I'm not here to answer your questions. I've asked you your questions and you have not answered them directly.
I understand.
Right.
So
we'll stop. We'll leave it there. Naftali Bennett.
Eradicate Hamas.
They cut him off. Ah, that was good. Ugh, decent journalism. I gotta say, the press has not been as light on the Israeli government as I expected. Well, certain members of the press have not been as light. Others have been more brutal than, like this, for example. Let me give you this example. This is a piece that was released in The Spectator. This is by Douglas Murray. Britain must stand up against those who support Hamas. Oh no, this is not. Oh, I gotta see. There's a quote in this I really want to use. Oh, there's a quote. There's a quote in this that I really want to use. I got Donowald. 1 second. Let me see if I can use my subscription. Here is Douglas Murray's article. Here is the section of this article that I just had to highlight for you guys to see the type of dialogue that is acceptable and that people will publish for people to read in their homes, completely removed from this conflict, finding out about it for the first time. The Israelis will respond as they see fit, just like we were talking about with the Naftali Bennett interview. Whatever they want to do, they'll do. That's the vibe we're getting from the Israeli government, and that seems to be the vibe from a lot of the defenders as well. It isn't for non-Israelis to give them advice. Okay, I guess bomb some children there, bomb some children there. I should be quiet. It's not my place. I was never born in Israel. maybe over there killing children is different than over here. Maybe Israel will cut off Gaza and starve Hamas out. Again, as I've said before, it'll be the working class Palestinians that'll starve out way before Hamas does. And if Israel's going to be engaging in this operation in like the next month, right? That Hamas isn't going to run out of food and fuel and what is necessary for them to live in the next month. It's going to take time. And in that time, the Palestinians will starve. Definitely, since there's no convoy to support them. Maybe Israel will cut off Gaza and starve Hamas out. Maybe they will have a full-scale military operation to rescue the Israeli captives. Or maybe they will finally put an end to this insoluble nightmare, raise Hamas to the ground, or clear all the Palestinians from that benighted strip. A strip which Egypt owned, but nobody wants. This is saying, I don't know what you guys think clear out all the Palestinians means. But in layman's terms, that's ethnic cleansing. We're going to clear out all the Palestinians, and that's our final solution to the problem. That's their problem to the solution. Finally put an end to this insoluble nightmare of the Palestinians living there. We're going to clear them out from the strip. He might as well have just said, turn it into a parking lot, or how Lindsey Graham said, level it to the ground. This is a call for ethnic cleansing that somebody read and published. They read this, they were like, that's okay, and they published it. And people around the world have read it, and it have influenced their beliefs. But we shouldn't be so surprised that this is the type of dialogue that's going on when we see how the Israeli government is treating it. But this is a call for ethnic cleansing. Calling it anything else is underplaying it. That's what this is. And if the Israeli government practices this, they will have practiced ethnic cleansing. Which, by the way, is the polite way of saying genocide. That is what, I'm sorry if I'm the one that popped that bubble, but ethnic cleansing is just a polite way of saying genocide. But don't worry, guys. We've got a real hero that has come out to give his opinion. Someone that the world has been waiting to hear his take on the war because he managed so many successful invasions well. George Bush. George Bush commented on the Israel-Hamas war. Negotiating with killers is not an option for the elected government of Israel. My view is one side is guilty, and it's not Israel.
It's going to be chaotic, and it's going to be, look, it's a democracy, and in a democracy, the people's voices matter, and there's going to be a weariness. You watch, the world's going to be, okay, let's negotiate. Israel's got to negotiate. They're not going to negotiate. These people have played their cards. They want to kill as many Israelis as they can, and negotiating with killers is not an option for the elected government of Israel. And so we're just going to have to remain steadfast, but it's not going to take long. It's gone on too long. Surely there's a way to settle this through negotiations. Both sides are guilty. My view is one side is guilty, and it's not Israel.
It's not surprising that George Bush, who committed the crime of aggression, is, in my opinion, a war criminal, is not that upset about Israelis bombing Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Not that concerned about it. Not particularly surprising. In fact, I would consider this an endorsement of my cause if George Bush was to pick up the other flag. Lastly, I want to show you guys, at least for this segment, a segment from Channel 4 News where they talked to the son of a missing Israeli peace activist that was kidnapped. I wanted to play this interview because I believe that the perspectives that have been shown aren't very inclusive of all the people who have experienced pain. And it's impossible to truly mourn the dead until we've stopped creating more dead. And I think this guy right here is, I think he gives a good synopsis of what his mom would have thought.
She was hiding in her closet. And we decided to stop talking on the phone, so she wouldn't be heard. And we wrote each other, and until she wrote me there inside the house. And then we just said our goodbyes. I wrote her, I'm with you. She wrote back, I feel you. 10:54, that was the last message.
What would your mother think of what's happening in Gaza now?
She would be mortified. Because you can't cure killed babies with more dead babies. We need peace. That's what she was working for all her life. I don't want people to hear what I'm saying in Israel. I stand by my message. But my friends, how can you not want, everybody to die? Pain is pain. And I talk with people from the kibbutz and we cry together. You can't mend that. But the only way to have safety and to live good lives is with peace. Vengeance isn't a strategy.
Vengeance isn't a strategy.